Hello and welcome to another episode of SEO Presso. My name is Björn Darker and today I'm speaking with Karl Kleinschmidt and about the future of technical SEO. And Karl is from Las Vegas, United States of America. He is Senior Manager Technical SEO at Intrepid Digital, an agency from California. He was previously Expert SEO Manager at Searchmetrics Inc., Senior SEO Director at 8560, and VP Engineering and Head of SEO at Auto Vittles. And SEO Presso is brought to you by Searchmetrics, a SEO and content platform that enables companies to plan success based on data and helps online marketers to really reach the goals. If you want to learn more about Searchmetrics, visit searchmetrics.com and don't forget to subscribe to the SEO Presso podcast on Spotify and everywhere else where there are good podcasts. Hey, Karl. Glad to have you here today and park it somewhere today. We're speaking about the future of technical SEO, and I'm super excited about this today, speaking to you because I'm your true expert on this particular topic. Let's start with the first question. I mean, SEO is like back then, SEO was mainly done by, webmasters. They don't even knew that they do SEO. So it was purely kind of technical, setting websites up, looking and mastering the website, maintaining it. And then it went into link building, actually. From link building, then it went into content, like the focus shifted to content. Then it was branding, general marketing, and so on and so forth. So what importance would you give technical SEO today in this wide variety of factors and disciplines?
It greatly depends on the size of your site. I always like to say that below 100 pages, it has close to no impact as long as you don't have a broken robots.txt file and have valid links. From 100 to around 3,000 to 4,000, it starts having a little bit of impact, and after 10,000, it has a huge impact, where you almost need a dedicated person that's looking into technical SEO after 10,000 pages, because there's so many things that need to be monitored, or very good software that will help you with that monitoring.
What do you see will become more important technically in the next years when it comes to technical SEO?
So as website technologies such as React and single page applications as a whole become more and more complicated, and how users interact with your website becomes actually important from an SEO perspective, or more important from an SEO perspective. The keeping up to date with how Google crawls your site, looking at your crawl budget, and can Google actually see what you expect it to see, that's going to become more and more important as websites become more and more technical and more complicated.
I mean, then actually nothing really changed, right? Because that was also important in the past, looking at, what Google is crawling, what do you send into the index, how's Google actually seeing, rendering those pages. Of course, with React and all those single page applications, it becomes more complicated. So you really have to make sure that you have like the right tools in place. But I mean, as you just described, especially with this web development, technical SEO becomes even more important, actually. But on the other hand, and that's a trend we're seeing here in Europe, I don't know if it's the same in the US, but on the other hand, you have more and more general marketers taking care of SEO, and this is increasing, right? And so where do we move to when it comes to technical SEO, that on the one hand side, we have more general marketers, they don't know that much, and they don't have that deep knowledge into technical SEO. What do you think, how will the future look like, and if you take this into account?
I definitely think that if you're a general marketer that's the SEO for a big website, I would heavily recommend either training one of your developers on SEO or hiring a technical SEO. Things are changing at such a fast pace in how Google crawls your site and what best practices are, right? The term cloaking used to be a really, really bad thing. And now we have Google approved companies out there selling really cloaking, and it seems to have zero impact on ranking. And so it's really important that if you are working on one of these big sites and you don't have a technical SEO, that you either train one or hire one, most likely hire one.
I mean, what you're just mentioning is like tools like Rendertron, for example, right? Which you can use if you have single page application, React, or also AngularJS, who they do actually the server-side rendering for doing. So meaning that they create a version for the bot, which is different from the version from the client. And that's totally okay for Google, right?
We haven't heard anything despite that, even though I'm sure that if you ask Google, is cloaking okay, they would say no. But pre-rendering with and pre-caching with changed content that's only served to bots does seem to be okay, which I would consider cloaking, but maybe I'm a purist when it comes to that. Like by the old definition, right? Like if you ever showed Google different content than you showed visitors, you were cloaking. And that's definitely not the case anymore.
I mean, page experience in particular has become like a huge topic, right? And actually it combines important factors like, page speed, security, mobile usability, and so on and so forth. And there was actually a recent study here in Europe that actually showed that pages that meet Google's requirements when it comes to Core Web Vitals, for example, they rank 1 percentage point better than the average, right? On the other hand, pages that don't, meet the requirements, minus 3.7 percentage points worse, right? As an SEO, I mean, you have to be somewhat technical to understand the full scope of that recent changes, right? But actually, it's a topic for devs and also product owners, right? So what role plays, especially in-house SEO, also when you're an SEO in the agency, what role plays SEO in there from your standpoint?
Well, it plays a huge role, but my number one recommendation is to try to talk to developers and product owners and get involved before the software gets released, instead of only setting up strong monitoring and then catching it afterwards. First of all, right, you have the 28-day delay of the field data, and fixing things after it's released is so much harder than it is fixing it while it's in the release process. And so when I work with developers and product owners, first of all, I explain Core Web Vitals to them and show them how to use Chrome DevTools to troubleshoot their code while it's still in a staging or development environment. And then I normally also come up with baseline metrics where you say, if the Core Web Vitals moves, the field data moves this much in the wrong direction, then you have a problem and we need to revisit it. I also work with UX because they're building the mockups. And if UX is designing an experience where there's 5 sliders that are moving rapidly across, right, the chances that you have a good Core Web Vitals are very low. And so getting UX involved, explaining it to them, and then the last step that takes a little bit more effort, but is definitely worth it, is to create what I call SEO regression tests, where instead of just follow this process, you actually build automated tests with the QA department that automatically test things like Core Web Vitals and canonical links and H1s to see, did this release break any of that? And if it did, how badly did it break things? And then you can catch it before it's released.
I mean, that's super interesting, especially the regression testing. When it comes actually, I mean, that's also like growth hacking, for example, but also if you do product development, like A/B testing is a big topic, right? Do you have any specifics or any tips that you can give the listeners how to proper do A/B testing when it comes to SEO?
I would be very careful with A/B testing page experience because Google groups the similar pages together. And so if you all of a sudden split similar pages into 2 groups, you could be causing some confusion where one page type all of a sudden becomes 2 page types. And then it would depend on, is Google smart enough to figure out that they're no longer the same? And that's a risky thing to do with not very much impact, because in my opinion, page experience is like you're fixing bugs. Yes, there are things that you need to optimize, but there isn't that much to test unless you have some implementation hindrances that are preventing you from optimally implementing. I think A/B testing as a whole definitely has its spots, especially if you're doing per page So like, for instance, monitoring CTR for the different URLs in a page type, and one you use this title formula and this one use another title formula. I'm sure that definitely has its space. I prefer impact modeling instead of A/B testing, where I measure the impact of a change and see if it had a statistically significant change. And if it did, great. And if not, let's do another iteration. For intent and those kinds of things, it's really hard to A/B test because intent changes so much. And per page types, it's also really hard to figure out if all your pages are ranking for the same intent. And so I mostly do A/B testing for very small parts of the page, not any of the large portions.
At the same time, at least since I'm doing SEO, automation is also like a big topic. Like you go to, each and every conference, they talk about automation, you read blog posts. Like automation is the thing which, gets pulled through like more like at least one decade of SEO, right? As we are going now into also an era where, Google is like becoming much better with machine learning, AI is a big topic, but not only for Google, but also for like the web development and development of the internet as a whole, right? When it comes to SEO, and we often say SEO is dead, right? But there is a specific idea, like a specific vision of automating big SEO topics, right? Where do you see opportunities in technical SEO, especially in the future when it comes to automation?
I think the biggest opportunity is in pattern recognition, especially for giant websites. The amount of data that you're looking at, no human can detect all the necessary patterns. And patterns are the only thing that really matter for a large website, right? Like if you're monitoring the crawl data of 1 million pages, then no, you're not going to be able to, or it doesn't make sense to analyze individual pages. It's about patterns. It's about patterns per page type. It's about changes in patterns. And so automated detection of patterns is, I think, the most important, but also the easiest to understand from an automation perspective.
I mean, there's also like in a recent year or so, that's at least when I came across this topic the first time, called Edge SEO. And, the thing is with Edge SEO, the whole story behind it is you can install service workers on the edge of your infrastructure, for example, and they detect whenever something like a robots instruction, your robots text or your canonical or redirect is actually missing or it's not there anymore. And what they will do, it is actually automatically then creating those instructions or creating those canonical tag again, right? So it's something where you as an SEO actually can have sleeping well night because, you don't have to worry about when there's a deployment, something gets, is broken, knowing that Edge SEO is something where you can automate at least most of the recurring work which we do as an SEO. Do you think that is something in a way of automation which could be kind of the future of SEO as well?
I don't know if it's the future of SEO because it's a person. There's always a person involved to some degree because the rules need to be established, right? I don't think we're at an AI level where I would trust AI to implement or blindly implement redirects for me. And so I think I like the idea of edge workers. It gives more power to the technical SEO, but it also gives more responsibility to the technical SEO because you can break your site from an SEO perspective using this. So I think the biggest advice I give for edge workers is make sure you're following software development best practices. Don't deploy to live. Don't blindly implement things. Run QA, run regression tests. Follow those best practices so you're not surprised in the middle of the night when the AI just starts blindly implementing redirects.
And on the other hand, it's kind of a wet dream of every SEO because then they don't have to go into the pipeline of, a huge backlog and stuff like that. But you're completely right. And I also asked this question like last year, our, common colleague from Searchmetrics, Malte Landwehr, and he actually gave the same answer that you gave because it's a nice idea for SEO teams if they can, overcome the development department can just do what they do. but they can also do a lot of shady things. That's what he at least also said, and that's very true. And you have like those rules, as you just said, within an IT team, where you have to stick to certain processes and stuff like that. And it's also, if you consider you're an agency, for example, right, and then you work for a big enterprise, there's no way that they give you access to the infrastructure where you can do a lot of those stuff, right? But however, it's discussed within the SEO industry, and there's also tools out there which claims that they have like this functionality which kind of automates SEO in the future. But I'm completely with you, and also Malte on that piece. It's not going to work in real life, right?
The other thing, right, is there's always exception to rules, right? I'm sure every one of us has come up with an amazing new formula for H1s or URLs, and then something broke because this page has a weird exception, or someone manually implemented something or something like that. And so that's the other thing to be really careful of, is try to limit the amount of exceptions or implement exception catchers, because you're making a lot of assumptions when you're using that kind of software.
Absolutely. Let's get back a bit. Like, in the recent years, we've talked about JavaScript, which was a big topic, like 2016, 17, the importance of headless browsing for server-side rendering, for example. We jumped into the understanding of, protocols, understanding web security, core web vitals, la-di-la-di-da, right? On the other hand, what I see is currently a new movement, which is they call it no-code movement, right? Where you essentially have platforms where everybody could just build a website with no coding experience, just using visual platforms, that help you to build a website by simply drag and drop certain elements and stuff, right? So now we have learned all of these things, but for me, it's also like kind of a no-brainer looking into the future that those platforms will gain more and more market share, because it's it's not wasting that much resources. You don't have like, a huge effort to build websites. Everybody can actually do it, which means that a lot more, especially small, medium businesses, will use those platforms. Now we have learned all of this, right? What are we heading to when it comes to technical SEO, especially with this in mind?
Right, like, so Shopify just crossed that milestone that Shopify websites now get more website hits than Amazon. We're definitely going in that direction. Those websites are great for smaller businesses that are just starting out, right? You don't need to understand anything about SEO. You don't need to understand anything about website design or anything like that. You're just doing what the experts say, and you focus on whatever you're promoting. The problem starts when you need to transition to a bigger websites. These platforms are continuously getting better and better at managing big companies, but I think your own website and custom build code will still always be better for a while. I think maybe these platforms will get to the point where that's not the case. I don't think they're there yet. And I would recommend transitioning earlier than necessary, because the transition is going to be a pain, right? You don't want to be transitioning in the middle of your growth curve, because there's a chance something might go wrong. So I would transition earlier than later.
The thing I mentioned earlier in the podcast was like we have an increasing amount of general marketers doing SEO, right? At the same time, we just clarified that technical SEO is getting more and more important, because also web development is getting more complicated. There's like headless browsing, JavaScript, and so on and so forth. Now, looking at the tool landscape within the SEO industry, I mean, you see the same development, right? They're preparing their software offering for more general marketers, trying to automate a lot of things, trying to explain, make it more intuitive, right? But especially when it comes to SEO, like, do you see much of the tools, or many of the tools actually can help with this specific discipline within SEO?
Yeah, I definitely think nowadays, if you run even a medium-sized website, if you don't have a crawler and or a log analyzer, you're setting yourself up for disaster. It's almost as important as ranking checking nowadays, where you need to make sure that you're regularly crawling your own site as Google would do, and you're looking at the log files to see how Google is crawling your site. And if there And I would heavily recommend tool assistance to catch the errors with your log files. Your IT department can help you as well, but SEO tools are getting better and better, especially in the last few years with crawling and log analyzing.
I mean, you're building a lot of tools by yourself because you see that most of the tools can help with the use cases that you especially need for your clients, right? And on, I think, called Kleinschmidt.com, you have a lot of tools. Can you explain a bit of what you have there and what are the use cases?
So the tools that I built are mostly to make SEO's jobs easier for large data analysis. So for instance, one of the first things I did when I joined Searchmetrics is I did 1 million keyword gap analysis, which took me 3 to 4 weeks in Excel. And so now, for instance, I built a tool that can do that in 3 to 4 hours. And the output is very similar. And so those are the kinds of tools where these steps that take you normally weeks or days, you can now do in a very short time. And it just makes a lot of productivity tools and making your life easier tools.
When we speak about the future, we also have to speak about visual and also voice search, right? And I don't know if you've just read the news that Google is actually expanding what they do within the Google app with Google Lens. So back in the day, you had the chance to use the Google app. I could actually take a photo of your sneakers, and then I would get a product listing ad within the app displayed where I could immediately buy it. Now they also integrate it into the normal, I would say, browsing experience, right? You read an article, you see a picture, you like that code, and then you get actually a product listing ad showed where you can buy immediately the stuff. Yeah. Same goes when we talk about the direction of voice search, and there's a lot going on, even though it's not as important now. But with all the development, I believe, and I also talked to some experts that, Google is just preparing for the, let's say, next 10 to 15 years, right? When you look at technical SEO now and technical SEO in the future, when it comes to those new search technologies, I would say, how do you see, what is like kind of the requirements for technical SEO then?
I think schema is going to become more and more important. I think that if you are in the middle of transitioning to a new web platform, or you have the development resources, try to build an infrastructure that allows you to put schema on any page, right? Like from FAQ, from product markup, from EAT is becoming more and more important, especially for your money, your life keywords. And schema can have so much impact there. It's not a ranking factor, but it allows Google to better understand. And if you have an FAQ, your most important pages, if in voice search someone asks that question, there's a good chance if you have the authority that you will be the answer that shows up to the voice search. So I think from a technical perspective, I think schema is the #1 most important thing.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, especially when we now take our web platforms that we have now, like our websites, then schema is definitely a way to go. I also believe that in future, we will most probably work a lot with feeds, right? Like a platform where we feed the most important information for visual platforms, but also voice platforms actually via feed, if it's an XML feed or whatever kind of snippet that remains to be seen. But I think that's how we actually feed those systems in future as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, right? I've been surprised at the amount of e-commerce companies that I've run into that aren't running PLA ads because they don't find them effective, that are not submitting free Google Merchant Center product feeds, right? And so, yes, the data needs to be correct, but I would suggest to anyone, generate those feeds even if you're not running PLA ads, because I've seen recently a huge uptick in popular product SERP elements. And so I would definitely recommend submit those feeds even if you're not running the PLA ads.
It's been a pleasure. I think the future of technical SEO will be definitely exciting. It's getting more and more important. Everybody should get actually into it. And thank you very much for the conversation today. Next week, we have Eli Schwartz on the podcast. He's the author of Product-Led SEO. And see you next week. Hear you next week. Thank you, Karl. Greetings from Berlin to Las Vegas. Ciao.